whenever you guys want, you're good to go.
Okay, so our experiment was testing the effects of food on blood pressure and heart rate. So our research question was, what are the effects of different types of food, sweet, salty, spicy, sour, on heart rate and blood pressure? And our hypothesis was that the heart rate and blood pressure of the test subjects were increased by a substantial amount when they ate sweet, salty, spicy, and sour foods.
So these are our methods, and our procedure was basically like we had people not eat food for 16 minutes before the experiment, and before the start of the experiment, we tested their baseline blood pressure and heart rate, and after we collected that, we gave them the chocolate, and then we tested their blood pressure immediately, and we like repeated that for each of the foods, and yeah. And then some of the materials we used were Funyuns, spicy Cheetos, Sour Patch Kids, and chocolate, and we used a scale to measure out the food, and we also measured the blood pressure and heart rate with the blood pressure.
So our results. So as you can, so for our heart rate, as you can see, salty chips increased our heart rate the most. While we call it obviously when you no food, right, the lowest. But out of when you're eating sour and sweet, they are equal, and salty is the highest. Okay, so for our blood pressure, sweet and spicy were the highest, while sour was the lowest. And for our diastolic blood pressure, we call it salty was the highest once again, while sweet and sour were the same. So with our combined graphs, you can see that this is the data. We just take a look at it. And salty overall remained the highest.
Alright, so going into our discussion and conclusion. So did the data support our hypothesis? So the data did support our hypothesis because different foods did end up increasing the blood pressure by a substantial amount, and it also increased the heart rate as well. But it did change in different ways. So we thought that was pretty interesting. And so as for limitations of the experiment, of course, we did have human error. So when it came to eating the hot Cheetos, a lot of people had low spice tolerance. And so people weren't able to eat all of the food, which means that we did not get the exact amount of sodium that we wanted our test subjects to have. And so that was human error that we had. So as for future studies, we're thinking about how could we have done this experiment differently. So we're going to, in the future, ask people with a spice tolerance to be part of the experience, so like a high spice tolerance to be part of the experiment. Then we would also try and find foods that didn't have a mix of sodium and spice. So because the spicy foods also had high amounts of sodium, that could have easily thrown off our data. And so getting foods such as a hot pepper that doesn't have a high amount of sodium would be the best choice to go in the future. That is all.
Alright, questions? Can you guys go to your big data slide so you can just see that while they're asking questions?
Go ahead, Emma.
I just have a question about like the conclusion of
Yeah.
the data. It's pretty much the same question I asked the other group, but like, what do you guys think is like the physiological mechanism that's causing the heart rate to, as you said, or the heart rate and the blood pressure to increase when they're eating food? Like, why do you think that's happening?
We didn't do a lot of research on that, but using our own knowledge, pre-existing knowledge, I would assume that like having sugar in your body, that's something that's really important. You need the glucose, so it might like spread on your body faster, increasing heart rate, as well as salt, the importance of salt in your body as well. As for spicy and sour candies, I'm not too exactly sure the significance that would have like in your body, but I'm sure there's some like sort of like nutritional value with that. But I think in the future doing research on that would be really interesting to figure out for sure. Thank you for the question. I'm sorry, Ayana.
Was there a specific reason for the 16 minutes of no food? Like, it was kind of specific.
Yeah, so we decided to spend about like 16 minutes. We thought 16 minutes was a pretty good time, mainly because we were going to test their blood pressure in the way that it increases as well as the heart rate in 2-minute increments. And so we thought 16 was a good even number to use, but we ended up just keeping it with 16 minutes just because we felt like that was a decent amount of time. And we also didn't want our test subjects to have any food in their body or have any leftover amounts of like sugar, salt, spicy, sour foods that would throw off our data. Any other questions?
I'm curious, so you had just to make sure I understand the time frame, you had 16 minutes of no food, then they would eat, and then how long before you would take the measurement after they ate, just to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so as soon as the test subject was done eating, we would immediately test their blood pressure and heart rate. So we didn't like waste any time between that, and we didn't test while they were eating because it would take different people a different amount of time to eat the food, and we also wanted to make sure that they had that specific amount of sugar, salt, whatever the case would be in their body when we tested it.
How long would you put between food groups with people?
So we mainly did it immediately. The amount of time that took for people to eat the food and the amount of time that took us to log the data gave us about 10 minutes each, roughly that amount of time. So we did have some space in between the type of food they were eating when we measured it.
I find these results really fascinating. I'm going to drill a little bit into the physiology with you guys because I find these so interesting. And I need to ask, how long does it take to absorb nutrients from the food you eat?
I'm not exactly sure.
So do you think it takes 10, like if I eat something, how long does it take for the sodium to enter my bloodstream? Which is what you had initially kind of said, you know, the sugar, the sodium, whatever it is, it's getting into the body, and then that's like affecting the heart rate and blood pressure in some way. Do you guys have any, like, thinking about your time frame, do you think that the food had enough time to be absorbed and then have that affect
I don't
your results?
I'm gonna answer this question, you all can, because I can be answering questions. I don't necessarily think so, mainly because it takes about like 20 minutes for your body to like know that you're full. I don't know how that correlates with your body knowing that it's completed its cycle, it's absorbing nutrients, and it's like, okay, we don't need any more after that 20 minutes. That's what I would assume, but I'm not exactly sure. Do you guys want to hop on that, or is that right? Okay, sounds good.
I'll just stop in and say very quick that food goes into your stomach, it is not absorbed there, it's broken down, and then it eventually goes into your small intestine where it starts to get absorbed. That takes like 30 minutes minimum to get to the actual like absorbing nutrients phase. And I bring this up because I don't think that's why you're seeing this, but I'm curious if you have any other theories about what else, because you have a really clear reaction happening. You have a very clear trend. Jumping 15 beats per minute, as you get these kind of like more intense foods, there seems to be something happening there. Are there any other physiological mechanisms besides the actual things in the food that you guys can think of that might lead to this kind of reaction in heart rate and blood pressure?
So when you eat like food that tastes good, your serotonin and dopamine levels spike, and that could increase heart rate and blood pressure in your body. And that's what I think at least.
Yeah.
So you think it could be like the enjoyment of the food or the experience of the food is mimicking that effect of increasing heart rate and having it happen?
Yes.
Interesting. I wanted to get that because I think it's very interesting results. Anybody else have any questions for? All right, guys, thank you. Oh, was that a question?